So before we jump into this incredible 10 out of 10 amazing episode of the Fruits Basket anime, we do have to discuss the major translation issue that this episode pretty much ends on. And had I not had about a couple dozen people spam me with it, because I really don't read Fruits Basket discussions outside of my comment section, I would have thought Shigure was a very evil bastard. The way the episode ends is basically saying something along the lines that Agito should teach them a lesson, and that looks pretty bad from his point of view because he's been a very mysterious character. You don't know his motives. Is he friend? Is he foe? Is he neutral? And then you end the episode on seemingly a very evil line. But the official translation from the printed manga, something not fan subs, not anything like that, from the official releases, it basically sums down to the official translation would be something along the lines of Akito needs to understand. As if Akito doesn't understand what's going on and Akito needs to change, not that he's an evil bastard wishing harm to others. So I'm not sure exactly why this happens, because when you do translate from Japanese to English, because they don't use all the same conjoining words and things like that, it can be very easy to read something at a first glance probably and assume that's how it is. And I'm not going to say go hunt down the people who translated this. Mistakes happen, and I'm sure over time, because Crunchyroll is actually pretty good at correcting mistakes. If people don't like a translation, they will update the translation in due time, and usually within a couple of days. So don't go hunt anyone. I'm just here to let everyone know, do not view this man based on that translation, because clearly that was a mistranslation and needs to be updated. So thank you to the couple dozen people who spam me with that, because I would have thought very, very different of our man right now. Now I'm back to where I was, not sure what to think of him, and I love that. But this episode, I truly think was 10 out of 10. I loved every single minute of it, and I felt like I watched a couple of episodes, and honestly, this was some of the most exciting content I've watched all season for Fruits Basket, and that may be a very bold claim to some, hell, it's a bold claim to myself, but the first half was amazing with the whole Machi as well as Yuki content. I honestly think they're the most adorable potential couple I've seen in the show to date. Very bold claim, I know, but goddamn does this melt my heart to make me feel bad for the girl. And yet again, another bad family dynamic. But then again, we're watching Fruits Basket. We know we're going to get into bad family dynamics when we have good ones past the odd one. Really, it's a majority of the time they goddamn suck. But I mean, there's some great stuff with Yuki towards the end, and there's some actual brutal stuff with Yuki with Akito, and just overall, it felt like this was a growing episode in that, it's time to stop blaming others and take things into your own hands and see the change around you, and even if bad things happen, figure out a way to push through and persevere, and I really like the theme and message of this episode. I think the whole idea of Yuki and Machi potentially being together in a romantic relationship is very intriguing to me, because rather than going the route of just saying, okay, Yuki doesn't have a love interest because Toru isn't his love interest, let's slap a random female his way. Rather, they're giving a character who feels like a person first and foremost. She has her own issues. She's not blindly falling in love with the prince of the school. She's probably the only character in this series that we've seen who hasn't judged him at face value as being the pretty boy prince who gets flustered or thinks that he's a very high-class person, but rather just observed him as a very lonely person from day one, but then slowly but surely started seeing him genuinely happy once he joined the student council. But when you really start learning more about her in this episode and how she legitimately doesn't understand who she is. She has no opinion, she doesn't, if you were to ask her what her favorite color is, her favorite food, she wouldn't give you an answer, because seemingly her family life was about basically raising her to be the picture perfect, to beat Kakeru, to beat all these people and just be the absolute best person and get the best grades and stop thinking for yourself, and then seemingly getting ripped away from that. But then now she's just kind of by herself in a very disgusting, almost like hikikomori apartment. It just looks disgusting, and you wouldn't think that's where she lives. You would think she's probably just in a very bland room, not something that looks like it could be infested by cockroaches. So it's really interesting to see someone who very much is trying to kind of separate herself from the student council, but really doesn't know how to interact. And that's why when they built up to the moment where Yuki bumps into her, because they're all going on this kind of like student council kind of little friendship date, if you want to call it, a little group meeting, and you see all of her content spill, and she's a bottle opener, and then you notice the leaf that Yuki gave her earlier, and she made a bookmark out of it. I thought that was a really interesting moment, because I've been very neutral on what I think of her as a person. I just assumed based on her isolation that someone like Yuki could probably break her out of that. And to see that for the first time, that she actually legitimately does have feelings, she does have opinions, it's just, she'll say, no, it may not be from you, but it may be from you, and everyone gets confused by that, and then how you recognize that she loves the color red, and how that actually makes her quite happy that things that she does say, like, this boy actually remembers, and it's not just like she's an issue or a bother, but maybe she's actually worth something. And it's so interesting to watch a character who could have easily been disposable, forgettable, Because honestly, usually in a show like this, you root for the main female protagonist, which would be Toru, and you would pick your favorite pretty boy. Kyo, Yuki, who are we gonna pick? But here they said, no, we're gonna give him a legit group of friends in the student council. We're gonna be bold and risky and say Toru isn't the end-all be-all of the show. Yuki is gonna find new friends that we haven't met yet, and now we're gonna establish them as people. And they've done a pretty good job. Not all of the student council, some have been more just kind of what their personality's been introduced as, but give it time with season 3, I'm sure they'll get a little more as well. And even if they don't, not every character has to be the most overly fleshed out character, especially if they don't get too many speaking lines. But overall, the main student council that we've been focusing on have really felt like people and have been established as really interesting characters. So it's why it's so easy to root for these two, and why when you see her blush or you see Yuki happy, you just kind of think to yourself, God damn, I'm not a shipper, but I gotta kind of ship them because they seem amazing together. And I really like this about the show, is that they're not afraid to take risks, and it's beautiful to watch those first 10 minutes play out because it's just remarkable writing, beautiful directing, and it makes you just feel upset and happy all at the same time. And I just really hope for the best for these two because they seem so interesting together. And honestly, this group is the only one that Yuki has truly been himself around, and obviously he respects someone like Toru because Toru is the motherly love that got him out of his shell. But he's actually finally establishing his own relationships for the first time in his life, and it's amazing to watch it flourish. And Machi is an amazing character who I really, really respect, and honestly, depending on where they could go with her character in the future, she might even rise into like a top 10 for me of Fruits Basket characters, not even joking. Now, the stuff with the Akito content in the banquet was very interesting to me. Yuki announcing that he was actually going to go for a day wasn't shocking. I mean, it was more shocking for Toru than it was for me because it kind of just felt like the natural progression because he's very much changing. He's not trying to blame people, he's trying to tackle the future with his own two hands and not feel like a coward dog anymore, someone who sits in the corner alone and afraid as people belittle him. Obviously made sense, and I was actually really happy that Toru kind of was very proud of him. The moments though leading up to where he started having this discussion with Akito saying like, because Akito's like, oh, I forgive you because you actually finally came to your senses, and he throws it back into Akito's face saying like things like, I'm done blaming people, I'm not going to blame my mom, I'm not going to blame Kyo, I'm not going to blame you. It's time for me to tackle my future. And I was like, that's bold, because you see a face that I don't recall ever seeing Akito have. And if we have, it's only been like briefly before. Then you start seeing a flashback. I'm like, what's going on here? Why is this triggering something? And then the bottle happens. And I thought this was so interesting because I'm not sure if it's done on purpose or if it just naturally happens because when you write an abuse story, it just kind of falls into place like this. But something that naturally happens when you are in an abusive relationship or you're in abusive situations is eventually you'll grow numb to it and you won't feel as shocked as the first time that happened. The first time that you get beat or just abused physically or just verbally, it's going to hurt a lot more than the 100th time. And Yuki's been someone who's been abused quite a bit, but the difference now is that Yuki's at a very good mental state and point in his life where he actually has friends, he has a future that he's fighting for. So when you see him get hurt like that, I actually felt like Yuki and I was numb to it. And that's not a good thing in terms of me being like, oh, I'm glad it happened to him, but rather because you wrote abuse so well in this story, it feels real as if we've just grown accustomed that Akito will abuse people and blood will happen. And that's why it was so easy for me to be like, as bad as it feels to say, I'm used to it by now. And I'm not sure if that just naturally happened because the author has wrote so much abuse that you just naturally grow accustomed to it, or if it was done on purpose, but based on everything kind of being laid out in such a realistic way, I'm willing to say that she wrote it on purpose to be like this, that you weren't necessarily supposed to feel as enraged as the first time you saw something physical happen, but rather you're just sad that it's still happening, but you're proud of Yuki for not overreacting and just, tackling the future head on and even apologizing to people that he feels like, when I was a kid, I blamed you for erasing, but you were honestly even more sad than me at the time. It's great to see how these characters are changing and how they're able to write such raw things and be like, at the end of the day, I just feel bad for Akito in that situation. And it's weird to say because I still don't know exactly what happened to this character, but kind of like similar to Toru or Yuki, it's just, you feel bad that a person like that can exist in that way, and hopefully something can change for the better, but you just never know with this series. Beautiful episode, incredible directing, emotional voice acting, and just overall just emotional. I've heard a lot of people say the last couple episodes wouldn't be as impactful as the season 1 finale, but honestly I'd have to disagree here. I honestly think this is even more exciting than the season 1 finale, because now that we understand the characters a lot more, it's very easy to get invested, a lot more than I did in season 1, and I was already invested in season 1. Look at that Toru analysis, I don't make that unless I'm invested. That's just me saying that Season 2 is even better, and I'm sure Season 3 is going to knock Season 2 and 1 out of the park. Of course, as always, let me know your thoughts and feelings down below, your favorite moment, and where you think it might go with the finale next week. Leave a like to show your support, and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.